This is the Heather Petero Show, where conversation meets calling. Well, welcome to the Heather Petero Show, and conversation does meet calling, and we're going to be talking about that today. But let's be honest, for some people, the word history brings to mind dusty textbooks, dead facts, powdered wigs, and a very real fear that somebody is about to assign homework. But the best history does not feel dead at all. In fact, it feels like a heartbeat. And my guest today is David Jones, author of The Unlikely Life of Oliver Atkinson, a historical novel that drops readers into America's founding through the eyes of a young orphaned, indentured boy who gets swept into the Boston Tea Party and the world of Paul Revere and the Sons of Liberty. David has said this book is his offering to America 250, and today we're talking about story, sacrifice, freedom, faith, and why the past still has something urgent to say to us now. David, welcome to the show.
Hello, Heather.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. Also, thank you for proving that history does not have to be delivered like a chore of a long parade of memorizing dates, wars, and zero indoor plumbing. The way you approach it feels different. It feels human. It feels alive, and it feels like a story. And honestly, that's where I wanted to start. So before we get into the book and the big ideas, I have to ask about a few things I came across in my research because I feel like they tell me more about you than your bio does. You have done stand-up comedy, and I need to know, was this a triumph, a disaster, or somewhere in the beautiful middle?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I had some friends who were producers back in my Los Angeles Hollywood days, and they had one of the producers put me in a short. During my audition, I think I was the 20th person. I just improv'd and just had them in stitches, and one of the other producers was literally rolling on the floor. So fast forward a few months after that production, one of the other producers was putting on a comedy show. Had a bunch of great comics lined up and needed an MC and thought of me. And so I said, sure, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'd love to improv. And so I headlined it. It was so much fun. I worked on material and every joke landed, and it was a beautiful thing. And the pros in the audience, the pro comedians, didn't believe that it was my first time on stage. So I got booked for a bunch of others. And the next time I did stand up, I thought I had to come up with whole new material each show. And I did like 3 nights in a row. And I'm going, how do the people do that? Well, I didn't know any better. No, you just keep workshopping the same stuff. You keep what works and you cut what out. So I thought I had to come up with a new show each time. So the second show was miserable. The third show was a hit. And the fourth show was miserable. And I learned that that's the way of the stand-up comic. And I saw that I had talent, but I figured I didn't want to be like in Dubuque on 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night getting heckled by some drunk. So I decided, that probably wasn't going to be my career path, but it was so much fun, and I still love making people laugh. It's one of my greatest joys.
Well, and then I found out that your one song you never skip is I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys, which I respect the commitment, but defend yourself.
Real men don't have to defend their love for the Backstreet Boys. I don't know what. I don't know. Growing up, I wanted to be a rock star and wanted to be an actor and all this stuff. And I wanted to get girls. And so, what better way than to be a Backstreet Boy? But, in spite of the fact that I've won 2 dance contests and danced in a musical, I don't have their skills. So, but I love singing that song. It is just such a fun song to sing, and I can sing every part. It's great for first date. As soon as I get a first date in the car, I turn it on and I sing. And if they can laugh with me and have a good time, I know they're all right. If not, then, well, it's going to be a short night, I'm sure.
There you go. Do you have any other obsessions with any of the other boy bands from that era?
No, it's Backstreet all the way. In fact, right before I got on here with you, a close friend of mine that I met in Hollywood, he's British. He's been major award winner in Europe and Britain for talent and stuff. He has a radio show on Hope FM there in south of England. And so I do a 1-minute thing every week, every Tuesday, and then I get to pick a song. He's an NSYNC guy.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, new kids on the block. He's a new kids on the, and that I don't get. That doesn't make any sense to me, but he's English. So maybe there's something there I just don't understand. So we go back and forth with the boy band thing. And so today I gave a little thing on the Lord testing us and what it's supposed to produce, and then got to pick a song. And this time I went with Backstreet Boys' "Shape of My Heart" just to have some fun with him.
There you go. Well, I personally am a Boys to Men fan. I love that era of 80s and 90s boy bands for sure.
I mean, I can't hate those guys. They're extremely
fantastic.
Yeah, they really are great.
Very talented.
Yes.
So also on your list of strong opinions that real men can wear pink.
Yes.
And as a Southern woman, I personally believe that every Southern man should own at least one pink button up. So I'm not here to fight you on that. I think pink is definitely a strong color for a man.
Well, it's funny because last Wednesday, in one of my home groups that I'm involved in, some of the country boys said, men don't wear pink. Pink shouldn't be worn by a real man. So I wore pink to church this last week. Yeah, real men wear whatever colors they want. And these boys should know that. Of course, all the ladies like it, but
oh yeah,
it's a great color. I wore pink in high school. I was the first guy to wear pink in high school, and the guys called me names and the girls swooned. So I learned never to dress for guys.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I also read that you describe yourself as an ambivert, which I love because it basically means I genuinely love people and then I absolutely need everyone to go home. I mean, that's a great way to be. You kind of cover all the bases, right? So you are funny, opinionated, deeply social, and then you disappear to recharge. I mean, that's a specific kind of human being there. And if I had to guess, it probably also describes what it is like to be a writer, don't you think?
That's really a fantastic point, because writers must be observational. They must get out of themselves and go absorb and interact and observe, and then go back to their space and allow their brains to process all of that and bring forth words that tell picture stories.
So before we get into the book itself, David, I want people to get to know you a little bit. You live in Myrtle Beach now. And what does this season of life look like for you day by day?
Well, my life is always seeming to be transitional. I'm always going from one thing to the next. It's part career-wise, maybe relational, church-wise, ministry focus, what have you. I love certain things being stable, and then I love influx. I love change elsewhere. A lot of people don't like change. I don't mind change. So right now I'm just in a transitional time in my writing and my creating, and also in a new church that I'm involved in where I'm doing ministry, and I'm actually working on curriculum right now for a course called The Refiner's Fire that I'm going to teach. So I love to have something new constantly to keep me going and keep things fresh. And then there are, of course, the things that I need that are just stable. But life is always kind of in flux with me.
Were stories a big part of your life growing up? I mean, what were some books that influenced you as a young person?
Well, I read my parents' library by the time I was 12, all the while being an absolutely horrible student. Because I was undisciplined, but I loved story. I was creating as a child. I was drawing. I was writing songs. I was writing short stories. And some of the books that I think I really loved, though, were like spy novels from like Helen McInnes from the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. Some of her spy novels, Cold War stuff. Of course, Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, that kind of stuff, because I was kind of a rambunctious child, prone to do all kinds of things out of character and out of ordinary. So those guys really resonated with me. I think my dad's love of history and my mother's love of history and current events, etc., that kind of sharpened some of my love of story. But I was the creative one, and my dad has authored or co-authored over 20 history books. But I'm the novelist. I'm the guy who dives into history with cool characters to tell stories and be immersive. So I think it's just the love of true history and just my creative nature coming into one, that from an early age, I just love stuff like, again, Tom Sawyer. That's probably Larry Murtry's Lonesome Dove was a huge influence on me when I was younger. And spy novels, huge spy novel guy.
Oh yeah, I love James Bond. I'm a huge Ian Fleming fan. So
Oh gosh, yeah, gotta love James Bond stuff. Ian Fleming's work was great. He's got a great backstory.
oh yeah, for sure. You have a history degree from Indiana University, and so clearly history was never just a subject. It was more about story. But history is not just a stack of facts. It is people making costly choices while having no idea how the story ends. Let's talk about the book, because The Unlikely Life of Oliver Atkinson is such a specific idea. What made you want to tell America's founding through the eyes of Oliver instead of through one of the famous names that everybody else knows?
Wow, I'm so glad that you make the distinction there, because most historical fiction finds a character that somebody already knows or general public may possibly know, and they tell the story through their eyes. It's going to sound terrible, but in 2024, I'm thinking ahead. I'm going, our 250th anniversary is just around the corner. How can I monetize this? And I came up with some ideas on what to do. And one of them included a book for young people, because I hate to hear young people or anyone say that history's dry and boring. Well, I can understand why they do, because it's often written in such a way that as you read it, it's like chewing on dry oatmeal. And I wanted a story that would not be like that. I wanted a story that would be an all ages, 12 and up kind of book, and see the founding of our nation through the unique eyes of somebody who was an immigrant, somebody who had suffered injustice economically, socially, and otherwise. I wanted to show the birth of our nation through his eyes, and have somebody relatable and identifiable for young people, but also write it smartly enough that adults could enjoy it too. In fact, I'm getting great reviews from adults on it, so I accomplished that. But I just wanted a sympathetic character, and I was going to start him in Boston, and I thought, well, what's his backstory? Because as a former screenwriter, or still a screenwriter, got to think of backstory. Want to find out what, and as an actor, you want to know, try to figure out what your character's backstory is, and bring them present. And so I ended up starting him off in England, and at his mother's funeral, and he was now an orphan, and then he becomes indentured, steals away, and comes to Boston. So I decided to write all that, and instead of starting him off in Boston and getting him there, I had him on one of the 3 ships that was ransacked in the Boston Tea Party, and he gets liberated by Paul Revere, and from there he gets exposed to the Sons of Liberty and Revolutionary War culture. And then I created a timeline of the entire process from 1773 all the way to the end of the war, and tried to figure out where would be reasonable places for him to be, kind of Forrest Gump-like, but that would be reasonable, historically accurate, and believable. And so within that timeline, I researched what I did and came up with this story. And I just wanted him to experience the pain and the suffering and these very brave souls that got together to create this nation, risked everything. And he was a part of that. He was risking what little he had, but I just wanted somebody who had nothing to lose, partner with men who had everything to lose, and be able to tell a really exciting story. My direct descendant, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Maryland, the signer of the Declaration of Independence, actually signed where he was from so the British could come get him if everything fell apart. He was also the wealthiest man in the nation and probably in the world at the time. He had nothing materially to gain. So I had this young boy who had nothing in life, who was an indentured orphan, team up with the same ideals with these men who had everything to lose.
Well, I think readers will feel differently as they experience the revolution through a boy's eyes rather than through the usual textbook lens. And you've used language about making history feel alive and not academic, and I really love that. Why is that so important to you?
Well, because, a camera can follow you and I around for a week and maybe come up with 5 minutes of shootable film, right? Something that's interesting. Well, it's the same thing when you look at history. When you look at history, especially back in times where they didn't have the technology to speed up and hyperspace everything so quickly, everything was plodding slowly. But I wanted to be able to take little vignettes of the realities of life back then, what they're doing, and make sure that my guy was intersecting with those. So it felt more adventuresome, things linked together, the pacing was quicker, people were coming in and out of different worlds and scenes and scenarios smoothly. So I was able to take all these mass space of history and kind of link it all together in one continual thread instead of, Paul Revere's wife, Rachel, sat down to make squirrel stew. Boring. But how does that fit into the whole overall story? I mean, that's not story. It happened. It's history. But I wanted the really just the unique and historically accurate things to be presented in a way that was dynamic, condensed, and drove a story. Were part of a really interesting narrative.
Well, and it's you're explaining it from, the 20,000 foot, ceiling, and we can learn what happened, but you don't necessarily know what it cost to gain our freedom like that. That's one of the big ideas underneath this book is freedom and what it means, what it cost, who gets to pursue it, and how deeply people are willing to sacrifice for it. And that feels really timely, for where we are now. So what did writing Oliver's story teach you about freedom that maybe you understood differently by the end than you did at the beginning?
I just keep coming back to the word cost. In life, we hear cliches like, nothing good worth having is ever free. And I think about our freedom. And as somebody who has a history degree and loves history, just absolutely loves history, I look back and I see that 99% of history has been dominated by a few elites over and basically enslaving in one form or another everyone else to do their bidding. And it's almost like the nature of man to want to be in bondage. It's like the Jews being led out in the desert and suddenly they're pining for Egypt again. And there's something strange in our makeup that drives us into bondage. But these are people that wanted liberty. They saw something different. And I think the Great Awakening had a lot to do with that. The Great Awakening brought about a spiritual freedom, an ability to be able to question authority and hold up scripture to time in history to see what was going on. And it gave people courage to understand that they were made in the image of God. And what should that look like in a society? What should that look like in a government? And so in looking at this great experiment, they knew, and it wasn't their original goal. The original goal was never not to be British. They just wanted representation. They wanted a voice to be heard. And don't we all want something like that? And history never really allowed that until these guys got together. And again, bringing my descendant, Charles Carroll, and my mother's name is Carroll, 2 R's, 2 L's. A bunch of people in my family still carry that name. It's been passed on for since and even before then, that they risked everything for ideals, for what they believed in. And I think today that we're willing to pay the cost sometimes for the wrong things. And as a Christian, I am willing to pay the cost for the cross, carrying the cross, preaching the gospel, standing up for Christ. And the book really, in my research, really made me just take a look at myself and say, what are you willing to give your life for? What are you willing to sacrifice everything, your freedom for? And so I gained a newfound respect for our founders. and which would include the women, by the way, very much, and many of the slaves and the freed blacks that were part of this, and even some of the Indians like Hanieri of the Oneida people who sided with the Americans because of a missionary going into his camp and living with them and preaching them, teaching them the gospel. So there's a cost everywhere. And when you are trying to shrug off the bonds of tyranny, of injustice, some form of, satanic, social, whatever bondage, there's always going to be a battle. There's always going to be a war. And the bottom line comes down to in your personal life or your family life, your church life, whatever, your national life, what are you willing to pay for to make sure that freedom is upheld and that the image of man is upheld. The image of God in man is honored and upheld. So, it just came down to cost, and it's a tough question. It's a sobering question.
Well, what do you think an orphaned, indentured boy understands about liberty that maybe the rest of us miss?
Well, I wanted him to, and I kind of stumbled into him, to be honest, his makeup. I wanted to create a sympathetic character without it being a pathetic character. And the reality is he's kind of a type of colonial America pre-revolution. He's in bondage, indentured servitude. He's an orphan. And he doesn't have a voice. His life is pretty much fixed in bondage and service and poverty. And so when he ran away from England and became a stowaway on a ship called the Beaver that ended up in the Boston Tea Party, the Sons of Liberty message about liberty and freedom and self-rule and those kinds of things really resonated with him. He wanted the opportunity that even colonial America provided rang true to him because he's a gifted young man, and he hoped there was something more to America than there was back home in England. And of course, the American colonists had hoped the same thing, although they didn't want to stop being British until the King George and the Parliament pushed them too far. He just wanted freedom. He just wanted an opportunity to make something himself. He wanted to be able to better himself. And the really cool thing about the Sons of Liberty is that they had Hancock, who was a very wealthy man working alongside farmers and others that they otherwise in any other British form would never congregate with. Tradesmen, lawyers, businessmen, printers and goldsmiths like silversmiths like Revere. None of those people in an otherwise normal world would have ever congregated together, but they were brought together by the ideal of freedom and self-governorship and self-rule and opportunity.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons why these stories matter so much. I mean, they keep us from turning real suffering and real courage into wallpaper. Your work explores faith and purpose too, and it's not in a preachy way, but in a way that takes moral questions seriously. And do you think people are hungry right now for stories that are morally serious again, stories that do not talk down to them, but invite them into deeper reflection?
I think more and more, because I think we've been saturated. It's no longer cutting edge to put filth on television or in movies, to be vulgar, to exploit sexual stuff and what have you. It used to be cutting edge. It's not. It's really kind of numbed us, but we've come to expect that as part of normalcy. Now, I don't, because I don't entertain myself with that stuff. I think story is a great place to deliver these things. It's a great place to be honest about things, but also show that there is another way and to communicate difficult things and to I am unashamed of the gospel, but the book is not written to be heavy-handed, nor is it watered down. It's just tries the same spiritual hunger that existed back then, coming out of the Great Awakening, is kind of where I see things today. We've done all the flesh. Is this all there is? And so I think the gospel message and the message of hope and freedom in Christ, and seeing that even the best governments of this world, like our own, are limited in their ability to deliver what only the kingdom of God can. So I think through my storytelling and through my desire to want to communicate the gospel and to reach people as well as entertain, I think story is the perfect place for that, whether it's on film or on paper or just in conversation.
Well, let's talk about the actual writing process, because meaningful work always sounds romantic until you're the one staring at a blank page, right? What was harder, getting the history right or making sure the story never turned into a textbook in dress clothes?
I didn't know what I was doing. I've written 12 screenplays, actually 13 by then. When I started this in 2024, actually 12, yeah. And I never saw a blank screen in all those years of writing. And then I had 2 scripts go to the top of DreamWorks and get kicked out of the system. And after that, I kind of lost it. And I went 12, 13, 14 years with only seeing blank screens. And I never thought I'd write again. So when I came up with this idea, I thought, well, let me sit down see if I can write 10 pages. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had the concept of an idea. I know that I wanted to see the worth through his eyes. And so what I typically do with my screenwriting is the same thing I did here. I said, I'm going to create a character and I'm going to let them take me on a journey. I'm going to find out who they are. I'm going to see life through them. And so when I sat down and I got to 10 pages, I was blown away. And I got to 20, and then I got to 50. Well, I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never written a novel, never read a book on writing a novel. I just felt like I knew story and was just going to have a fun. It's what I call a father-son project between me and the Lord, because I really felt his blessing, his joy when I'd sit down to do this. So it was one of those things I really got to share with him. It was beautiful. Well, lo and behold, 5 months later, I wrote it while working full time. I had a 160,000 word novel. You don't write 160,000 word novels. They're usually 80 to maybe 100. And so my goal of hitting 10 pages, I kind of overshot that a little.
Just a little.
With like a 600-page novel. And I'm going, what am I doing here? So I didn't know any better. And so I went to Blue Ridge Christian Writers Conference in Asheville in Black Mountain, North Carolina last year, a year ago, May.
Oh, I love Black Mountain. Beautiful area up there as well.
Sure is. It sure is. And it was a great conference, great writers conference. I wanted to go there and get validated or get told really go do something else. And I was really validated. Dr. Catherine Hutchinson Hayes read, I think, the first 10, 20 pages of the original novel, the 160,000 word one, and she was absolutely blown away. And I had no idea what I was doing. So long and the short of it is, after talking with some people, it was either cut up the book into 2 books, which I didn't want to do as a new author. Somebody might never get to the second part, and that was really what it was building towards. So I did what all good writers do. I killed darlings. So I cut 60,000 words from it, told some of the important stuff from England in a backstory when he's on the ship coming over, which is where I start the book. I started off in a storm of the century. And I took the end and I don't know, 50, 60 pages, and I ended up telling it in about a 3.5-page epilogue. So, and God gave me grace to do so because it all works. And it was actually a better story and it was tighter. So I had no idea what I was doing, to be honest with you, Heather. I just sat down and did it. And again, had a father-son project. And it's still to this day is such a blessing and a joy. And I can't wait to get to my next one. But in the meantime, I'm trying to make this book known and take advantage of our 250th anniversary and say, guys, I've put in a lot of work to this. That there may be something here. Give it a shot.
I wanted to ask, was there a scene, a theme, or maybe a turning point in Oliver's story that hit you personally or emotionally while you were writing it?
Look, one of my best friends, I've known her since third grade. She's actually the first girl I ever went steady with, fifth grade, which didn't mean anything. I think a week later we were broken up. So, but she's remained a close friend of mine, and she she read it and absolutely loved it. And she goes, "I saw you all over that place. I saw you all over the character." So I think Oliver is kind of a mini me in some ways, not completely, not entirely, but a lot of places where I was able to provide worldview and some philosophizing and response to certain things. Even his courtship to Clara, she said, "I see you in that because I see the way I see the way you communicate with women, how respectful you are, and that kind of thing." So I think I was all over it. I thought it was an opportunity to kind of help me get some stuff out, but it's not entirely me because he's a lot better guy than I am, and he's probably more intelligent than I am as well.
So, what are you building and writing and dreaming about next?
I have three other stories, and they're all about immigrants coming to America. Even the native peoples were immigrants. They had to cross a frozen bridge up what we now call Russia into Alaska and come on down. So at some point, we are all newcomers here to this land. And America has such a unique immigration history. And so I want to tell stories through their eyes and immerse them into American culture and history and have them intersect with major events, see how they respond, look at consequences and all that kind of stuff. So it's not about glamorizing American history and ignoring stuff because, like in my Oliver book, I deal with certain women's issues, slave issues, Indian issues, etc., and do so in a very respectful way that I'm not a revisionist. But I want to be able to tell the true history of our country and yet really promote the beauty of what God has given us in this nation and just the reason why it was established, God who establishes kings and kingdoms and sets our boundaries, why he did it. What is it? And are we still honoring him in that? So I think in the next three stories that I tell are going to be doing that at different points of history. The next one I think will be lead up to like the gold rush and Civil War, and then turn of the 19th century, 1900s. I've got a story I'm kind of got ready to go. And then I would have my fourth story would originate probably south of our border and at a more recent time in our history and tell the story of America at that point there. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for now. It really all depends because these things take time. They take a lot of heart and soul, and they're not cheap to do, not the way I do it. And so, I've got to know that people want my book. I wanted people to buy my book and let me know that I'm doing a good job. And if I'm encouraged that way, then it's going to make it that much easier for me to go back and shut out the world for another 4 or 5 months and do my work and hopefully bring something that will encourage them to say, "You got a third one?" And yeah.
Well, that's awesome. We'll be keeping our ears out for that for sure. So, David, on the show, we always do something called a quick fire round. And so no powdered wigs are required, just vibes and questionable colonial judgment here. So don't overthink it, okay? So just off the cuff. Okay.
Sure.
So which founder would have been the best podcast guest?
Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
The wittiest, the wisest, the cleverest, most clever. He was a man of the world and yet a true American. He wore his coonskin cap to French balls and they just adored him. And he had an appetite for life like few others. So I think he would have been the most interesting guest. I think Thomas Jefferson may have been the most boring. because he is very quiet, very shy. He's the man of the written word. And though very handsome, if it was purely just a non-video podcast, you would have been looking at your watch, wondering how much longer you'd have to endure this, because he would have been talking philosophy from Hobbes and Rousseau and a bunch of others. You would have gone, this is not good material. So those are the best and the worst.
So who would have been the worst person in the revolutionary group chat?
Oh, well, it probably would have been Benedict Arnold. And he was from Connecticut and greedy from birth, and was actually part of the Boston Sons of Liberty a little bit. But his whole purpose in life was to elevate himself. And he was a utter narcissist. He was greedy, power hungry, and had no moral compass. So it probably would have been Benedict.
Okay. So Boston Tea Party, brave act of resistance or the world's most aggressive customer complaint?
I love it. That's such a great question. That is so cool. I'd say both. I mean, it was something that happened 8 years after the original Stamp Act, and they repealed some of that, and they were trying to get their money for the French Indian War in other ways. And tea was primary way they did it. They did it on like a quarter penny tax. Can you imagine only getting taxed a quarter penny these days? Yeah. It was basically their way of saying, we're not paying you until we have a voice in how our money is spent. So I think it was all of the above.
Which revolutionary era job would you personally be terrible at?
All of them. I mean, if I had to be a farmer, forget it. I'd starve to death. I don't have the skills to be a goldsmith. I have dyslexia and ADHD, so being a lawyer would have been difficult getting through all the briefs. I couldn't have been a Backstreet Boy back then. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. Maybe if somebody just paid me for hanging out with him, I think that would have been a pretty good job. But if you had to hold a gun to my head, or a saber, or a musket, if you will, a shopkeeper, I guess, or a printer. Why not printer? I love the word. So let's go with printer.
All right. So finish the sentence. History gets interesting the moment you realize blank.
That everything we do makes up history. Even the little acts in your own home becomes the history of your home. It's kind of a butterfly effect, if you will. So everything we do can create history. We never know when we're going to be part of it or move the needle in somebody's life that will have an impact on other ways that we may never see. I think that's why this story is America's story, but it's all of our story.
That's awesome. Well, David, this has been such a thoughtful conversation. I love talking with people who remind us that history is not just about what happened back then. It is about what humans do with fear, sacrifice, conviction, responsibility, and hope. And that makes it very current. So before we go, I'd love for you to tell listeners what you most hope they take away from the unlikely life of Oliver Atkinson and from conversations like this one.
I would love if people read the novel and came away with a greater respect for the cost of our freedom, with a greater respect for the people who put their lives on the line for our freedom. And I also hope they come away entertained, and that they see that history, if told properly, is really exciting, and that they learn more and they take time to find writers that present history in a way that is not like eating dry oatmeal. But I really want them to come away being entertained, and also finally seeing the hand of God, the providence of God in all of this, because he's Lord of all, and nothing happens apart from his view and his willful allowance. And even America. So what is God's purpose here in America? What is his purpose in our lives?
Well, tell people where they can find you, follow your work, get the book, and stay connected.
So you can easily find me on Amazon. You can also go to my webpage, davidjones3, the number 3.com, and you can link through there. I also have a YouTube channel where I am unveiling 5 new videos a week. They're short 1.5 minute videos on the true history found in the book. It's called Oliver's History Project. And so you can track with those there. But the book is available easily. Right now, there's a fire sale for $14.95. It's normally $19.95. So if you can get there between now and Sunday, you can save a few bucks and still get the full impact of the story.
Well, that is awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. My guest today has been David Jones III, author of The Unlikely Life of Oliver Atkinson, a novel that places readers inside the tension, sacrifice, and humanity of America's founding through the eyes of one unforgettable boy. And I think that is what I will be sitting with after this conversation, that the past is not just behind us. It still asks something of us. It still reveals something about us. And maybe if we are paying attention, it can help us live a little more bravely in the story we are living right now. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Heather Petero Show, where conversation meets calling. Until next time. You've been listening to the Heather Petero Show, produced by Heather Petero Studios. Connect with us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit heatherpetero.com. Until next time, stay creative and live on purpose.